This particular video is for anyone that is hurting at this particular point in their lives, financially, energetically, emotionally. This video is a video of hope. It's my story before Life Beyond Limits. And it's one that I have shared before, but I want to share it in more detail with you today. Back in 2004, I had a $70,000 credit card debt. I had a mortgage which didn't have much equity within it, and I had $27 in my pocket and nothing in my bank account. To add to the stress, I was in a commission-only sales job. My biggest sale at the time was $3,000, and I got 10% commission. In fact, it was my only sale. I was the worst salesperson that they had ever had in the history of the company. I was working for somebody else. And I just knew inside that I was about to lose my job. Did I also say that I was recently married and we had our very first child? It was a tough time for me. It was, I thought everything was going to fall apart. We didn't know how we were going to find the money to even pay our mortgage. We didn't know how to actually find the money for food. We were in such a desperate position. And something that had happened on a very positive note is I'd studied with this mad American guy who started speaking in a completely different language than the language that I understood. And he was talking about a poverty mentality versus a prosperous mentality. And he was talking about all sorts of concepts that were very, very fresh and new to me. Now, I was sharing my story with him, and he said that the reason that you're in this particular circumstance has got everything to do with your beliefs. It's got everything to do with your expectations or your low expectations. Now, in all honesty, I just got angry at that particular point because I was frustrated and I was angry. I was really in a very, very bad state. And he said to me, the thing that you've got to manage is you've got to manage your emotional state. That's the sum total of all of your thinking, all of your beliefs, all of your memories of the past. And the life that you are living today is due to that sum total. This was a massive, massive affront to me. It was equally a massive wake-up call. This was my sliding door moment, but it wasn't a sliding door, it was an elevator that was either going to take me to heaven or hell. And it was a horrible, horrible time in my life, but I have since learned that horrible times in your life often have the greatest opportunities for you to shift. It's almost like the universe, what it's actually doing, it's giving your tree a big shake. And it's giving you things in your life that are so critical, so emotionally damaging or draining, because it's trying to get your attention. It's trying to wake you up to a new way of thinking. Now, what I ended up doing is I recall the following day after chatting to my mad American mate, I was in the office and I remember, the phone wasn't ringing, the sales weren't coming in, and I felt myself spiraling down, and I knew I had to stop that level of thinking. I knew I had to do something to spiral my level of thinking back up again. Now, one way to do that is to just look at a beautiful moment in your life. Now, regardless of our circumstances, there's always going to be one or more beautiful days in your life. So what I did is I went back to a moment when midwife allowed me to actually deliver my first child. And it was an amazing moment. It really was incredibly magical. No matter how bad your life is, I can go back to that moment, and it's so magical, it's so beautiful, it's so amazing that it can snap me out of a really bad spiral. And we all go through spirals, everyone does. But what happened for me is I felt myself spiraling back up. I felt better. It didn't change my circumstances, but it was about to. But I didn't know that at the time. So what I did is I sat at my desk. I remember closing my eyes, I just put my hands by my side, and I just meditated for a moment, and I just found myself in a better space. Now, I asked myself an interesting question. The question I asked myself was, what would I feel like? What would my life look like? What would it sound like? In fact, what would it smell like if I was a multi-millionaire? In fact, if I had millions of dollars sitting in cash reserves, what would my life be like right now? What would it be like? And the thing that I found myself doing is I found myself moving to a whole different level. It's almost like all the stresses for a moment disappeared. Now, you can do this by imagining you're like an actor in a movie and you have to get into character. So what I did is I got into perfect character and allowed myself to get myself to that particular point where I felt so much better. And I did. I felt incredibly good. And so what I then did is I noticed that I was feeling the stress was disappearing. I was feeling a lot better. I was feeling like I could do anything in that moment. And I remember getting up off my chair. I walked up to the glass. I had an office on the 46th floor, and I just looked out at the glass. I was looking over Melbourne. I began to think about all of those people in all of those offices and all of those buildings, throughout Melbourne. And I began to think about, if I was that multimillionaire, obviously you don't just get a couple of million and that's it. If you're a multimillionaire, money is coming in with some form of regularity. And I began to think, what would I be doing in order for all these millions to come? And the thing that I thought about, I had just finished my neuro-linguistic programming training and my life coach training, and that's where my mind went. I began to think that what I would love to do is I'd love to help all those people in those buildings, in those offices, those people who are not feeling so great, those people who are limited by their own thinking, those people who are probably in a situation that I was in at that very time. That was the greatest motivation for me. Then the magic happened. My phone rang. I turned around, I picked up my phone, and as a result of picking up that phone, the caller at the other end had given me half a year's income. It was a job that came through that actually gave me half a year's income, 6 months income, just from one phone call. Now you can imagine what I felt like at that moment. Oh my God, my brain popped. I kind of felt like something in this moment shifted. I had done something that completely shifted my life in that moment. Now, the fascinating thing is that I did it again. I did it for a second time. I went through the exact same thing. I meditated, got up against the glass, began to think about the value that I can give to Melbourne, the world. And the phone rang again. The very interesting thing between the first phone call and the second phone call was that the amount of money that I made the second time was $1,000 different to the first. In other words, they were so close. So now I had, in 2 phone calls, I had a whole year's income. I thought to myself, what if, even in that moment, what if my whole thinking had actually limited the results? Even though they were great, even though they were amazing results, what if they were limited just by my thinking? So I did it a 3rd time. But this time, I decided to feel even richer. I decided to feel even more prosperous. You know, I imagined that money had a communication about it, like money could speak, or money had a signal or a vibration. And I imagined that I was attuned to this vibration. I know it sounds a bit crazy, and it certainly is not logical. However, later in my life, I was to discover that there's a lot of science behind this. And I ended up putting it into a book. But let me go back, firstly, to the 3rd phone call. In that 3rd phone call, I earned a whole year's salary. Now, what I'm talking about when I talk about a whole year's salary, I'm talking about the entire income that I was earning in my job. In other words, my retainer. I had earned my entire year's income in 2 phone calls, and then in the 3rd, another year's income. So now I had 2 years that I could just walk out of that office and do whatever I wanted because I had met my sales targets. I had met everything. That's when I wrote it in a book. Now, when I put it in that book, I taught people what I had done, everything that I had done to lead to that particular point. Now, that book became a bestseller. It then got republished. Cover was changed for the UK market. And then it completely got rebranded and republished again as A Richer Way to Think, which I think is a much, much better title. But it changed my life. That moment, that shaking of that tree changed my life forever. From this point on, I declared that I would now go out and help those people that I was thinking about. I've now been doing that for 18 years. This is my 19th year of going out there and helping people to change their mindset, change how they think, so that their lives can start performing in the ways in which they desire. Funniest thing though that I've discovered over all of these years, the 2 hardest questions for people to ask and answer is, what do I want? What do I want? So that was my life before Life Beyond Limits, before I went out there and started helping people, teaching coaches how to help people, teaching trainers, teaching speakers. That was my life before Life Beyond Limits. So wherever you are right now, please understand that it's not forever. You can change your circumstance. You really, really can. But what you've got to do is you've got to get out of that state. You've got to think about a better time in your life. Allow your state to begin to shift and change. Nothing is forever. Your circumstance, regardless of how terrible it might be or how unfortunate it might be, it's not forever. If this message resonates with you and you know someone who really needs a bit of an uplift at this particular moment, send this to them. And hopefully this message will make a difference in their lives. My name is Rick Schnabel from Life Beyond Limits, and I hope that this has helped you at some level. And hopefully I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.